Greetings and salutations. I hope this video finds you doing well. Today we're going to talk about VirtualBox. It's been probably 4 or 5 years since I posted a video specifically about VirtualBox on this channel. There's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, I got away from doing distribution reviews. The other reason was that my main computer that I had for so many years had a couple of ancient Xeon Intel processors in there that were incompatible with modern virtual machines. So I couldn't run it on that machine, and I could have created another machine to run VirtualBox on, but I just kind of let it go for a while, and now I'm rediscovering it because, as you know, if you follow the channel, I got me a new computer, and it's a Resize system, and it's got 32 gigabytes of RAM in it, and it's got a very fast NVMe drive in it, and I am rediscovering the world of virtualization. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take you through installing VirtualBox. We're going to talk about creating a virtual machine, and then I'm going to show you how to install an operating system on it. A few things to talk about before we get into it. First of all, I know that there's going to be multiple skill levels out there watching this video. Some of you have just clicked on this and you're going, what the hell is a VirtualBox and why am I watching this? Well, I hope you'll stick around because this is really cool. Virtual machines are very interesting to me. They have been one of my favorite things to play with on computers for probably the last 10 or 15 years. Some of you are already familiar with this. You probably use it. Maybe you're just kind of medium level user. Hopefully you'll pick up a tip or a trick here and there from this video. And then finally, there are those of you out there who are experts and know more than me. I wish you would please share your knowledge in the comments. I would love to hear from you. This is not going to be a how-to video. This is just showing my experience. So keep that in mind as you watch. And we're just going to hang out and kind of walk through this. That's all we're doing. Your mileage may vary. If you choose to follow along and do on your system what I am doing, there are all kinds of variables that affect this. This is also very cutting-edge software. It is that way by design because it is used a lot to test cutting-edge distributions of Linux, new versions of Windows, things like that, okay? And inherently, since it is cutting-edge software, it has bugs in it. You'll find them. You'll come across things that don't work. And that's kind of part of the fun. Let's see what we can get this thing to do. However, your hardware, your distribution of Linux, whether you're trying to run it on Windows or not, whatever the deal is, that can affect the results that you get. And my suggestion would be to do a lot of searching online. There are a lot of people who work with this software every day, and you'll find that there are answers out there. You just have to look for them. And finally, I want to say that I do realize there are other solutions out there. There's QEMU, there's KVM, there's things like GNOME boxes. I have found all of those solutions to be somewhat simplistic. I really like the fact that VirtualBox gives you very granular control over what you're working with in the machine. And the other systems that I have played with, they always just leave something lacking. This is also an industry standard. A lot of people are using this software to test, run virtual machines, whatever reason they're doing this. And so therefore, you really get a sense of how good something is if it runs well in VirtualBox, then it's going to run good on hardware. Any distribution of Linux that comes along and says, well, this doesn't run good on VirtualBox, but it runs on hardware, beware. I've heard that before. 9 times out of 10, it's not necessarily true. So with all of that out of the way, let's take a stroll here through the VirtualBox website that we're looking at. This is virtualbox.org. I will place a link in the description to this video so you can come and look at exactly what I'm looking at. This is where you can get Oracle's very latest version of VirtualBox. In the repositories for a lot of Linux distributions, you will find VirtualBox a completely open-sourced version. If that works for you, fantastic. I personally like to go and get the version directly from VirtualBox simply because I know I have the latest You can set it up to tell you when updates are available, and you get you're going to get the cutting edge experience. That's what I'm trying to say. The one that you'll find in the repos for your Linux distribution, especially like Ubuntu, which are fixed releases, there's probably going to be 1, 2, maybe even 3 versions back from what they're doing right now. If it works for you, that's fine. If you're running like older operating systems in it, it'll probably be perfectly okay. But if you want to run like the very latest Windows, or you're trying to run the very latest Linux, you're going to need to have the very latest virtualization software. So this is what I choose to do. There have been instances in the past where, for whatever reason, I had to use the distribution version, whatever. Right now, this is working great. So what do? Well, you come to this page, and the first thing you need to do is download VirtualBox for whatever kind of computer you're using. And we're going to take a look at Linux distributions here, because you're going to see that we have lots of packages available for different versions of Linux. And it's important that you download the one for your Linux distribution. So if you're not quite sure exactly what version of Ubuntu you're running, check that out first. And go look that up in system information or whatever, so you know what you're downloading. Same thing goes for Debian. We have versions here for 10 and 11. I am running Linux Mint Debian 5 on this machine, so I had to get the Debian 11 package here and install it. And it came down as a deb package. It's very simple and easy to do. So whatever distribution of Linux you're on, you should be able to find a package that will let you install it here. You can check your installs. Oracle Linux, if you're running that, just use yum install VirtualBox, they say. There's all kinds of directions down here how to do it. You might want to take a look at that. It's really super easy to do on any of the Linux Mint versions. You just download the package and click on it, and it opens up. Once you have it installed, you're not done. You need to come and get this package here that goes along with whatever version of VirtualBox you are on. As of the recording of this video, we are on 7.0.8. All right, so if you know that that is what you're running, you need to get the VM VirtualBox extension pack that goes along with the version you're running. So that is important. That gives you lots of different options. It will allow you to use USB, for instance, on your system. You can bridge that. These days, the guest editions is included in there, whereas you used to have a different package that you had to download called the guest edition CD. You remember that? It's all in there. So you just get those 2 files. You should be set up. You should be ready to rock and roll. You have to do one more thing, though, once you have that installed. Install first the main package, then install your, I want to say guest editions, and I know that's wrong, so let me go down here and take a look and make sure that we say the right thing. The extension pack, thank you very much. Make sure you install that, then restart your system, and if you are on Linux, you will need to add yourself to the VBox users group. That's the first thing that I have up here. In Linux Mint, they make that super easy to do. So if I go to Settings in Linux Mint, and I scroll all the way down to the bottom here, you see Users and Groups. And I'm going to open that up and click on it, and you see here are all the groups that I am currently in. You can click there, scroll all the way down, look for VBox Users, which is right there, and make sure that that is checked. And it is, so I'm good to go. Or you can do it from the terminal, and all you have to do is use this command right here. Just paste it into a terminal and run it. That's all you have to do. And this, by the way, is a variable which will go and find out what your username is and make sure that you're ready to go. So you have to have sudo privileges to be able to do this. All right, that's number one. You can't run VirtualBox if you are using an account that only has standard privileges. You have to be able to have elevated privileges, and you need to be a member of that particular group, because you will be changing things on the system in the background when you're working with the virtual machines. Okay. By the way, all of this will be in the description for the video, and I will go through and explain what all of it does as we roll along. So let's go ahead and open up this software. I got it right here, and this is what it looks like. This is the VirtualBox hypervisor. It runs in Qt, so make sure that your system can render Qt in such a way that it is pleasing to the eye. Set your fonts and all that stuff. I already have a couple of machines listed here that I have been playing around with. We're going to start new. We're going to pretend that there are no machines here at all. So we've installed the software, we've added ourselves to the right group, we have the extension pack installed, we're ready to rock and roll. First thing you need to do is create a machine. Okay. Now, this comes in two flavors. There is a guided version, which is a wizard. We're going to use that. Or there's one that's not guided, and you have to just click on everything and make sure it's set up. So the first thing that you need to do is come up with a name for your virtual machine. It can be anything that you want it to be. I am going to create an Ubuntu Mate machine today, just for fun. And it is going to, first of all, it's going to recommend where to put the actual file that will contain this virtual machine. And that's fine. We're going to put it in that folder, which was created when I installed the software. You could put it somewhere else if you wanted to. It's already figured out that we're doing Linux because I put in Ubuntu somewhere, and it knows that it's 64-bit because 32-bit is kind of a thing of the past these days. So now we have to find an ISO image for it to mount in its virtual CD drive, or actually DVD these days. And yes, it does have an optical drive emulated in the virtual machine. The idea behind these virtual machines is the fact that we want the very most basic hardware that we can come up with. Okay? So I don't have that listed here, so I'm going to go over here, and I have a bunch of ISOs on the computer, and we are going to choose Ubuntu Mate 20.04. And so that will now be in our little tray of our virtual optical drive. So we'll go next. And we're going to skip this. This is a... it's an install that you could see. Where is it? Is it over here? Yeah, we want to skip that. We'll try and automatically do that for you. We're going to do it by hand. I don't want to do that for a lot of reasons. Now, it's actually something that I haven't played with, so if you want to do that, you go right ahead, but I'm not going to do it. Now, as far as memory is concerned, we can just type that in. I'm going to give it 4096. We're going to create like a little laptop here. I like to make like little, almost Chromebook style laptops, and I'm going to tell it that it can have 3 processors. In this machine, the AMD Ryzen chip that I have is 4 cores, multi-threaded with 2 threads each, so I figure giving it 3 is nice. That's a little better than 2, which would be like an old Core Duo. You could give it 1 if you were creating a virtual machine you didn't expect much out of. Don't do this. Do not enable EFI. You really don't have any reason to do that in a virtual machine unless you are specifically testing something with, let's say, the Grub 2 bootloader, and you want to play with EFI systems. I guess you could do it then, but if this is a machine that you intend to use, don't bother with it. Alright, let's see. The next thing that we need to do is create a virtual disk. Now, this is a file, actually, that will be on your machine, and it's a virtual hard drive. So I like to go ahead and allocate 40 gigabytes. I think of the old 40 gigabyte hard drives when I do this. And you can have it pre-allocate if you want to, which means it'll create a big 40 gigabyte file for your machine. You can give it more, by the way, and you can also expand these drives and make them bigger later on. We'll talk about that toward the end of the video. if you do not pre-allocate a size, your file will grow over time, which means that it actually takes up less space on the drive. However, they can get pretty big over time. There's a way to shrink them. We'll take a look at that. So if you do not pre-allocate a full size, then we'll only use as much space as we need. And then you could just not add a virtual disk if you didn't need to, like you were always going to run the thing off of a boot image, like a live DVD, CD, kind of USB image. Whatever works for you. We're going to create a virtual machine, and it tells me all this stuff here, and it tells me all about it, and blah, 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 blah. So we're going to create the virtual machine. It says pre-allocating the full size is faster. I want to go back, make sure I didn't select that. Nope, but yes, it is faster if you pre-allocate. It makes a great big file, but we're not terribly worried about performance here. Let's see. EFI enable, they say it is faster. But then again, they say it's for special OSs. I personally don't bother with it. So we're going to go ahead and finish the machine, but we're not going to boot it up yet. We're not going to try and do anything with it because there's a few more settings we want to take a look at here. Let's just go to settings, and we're just going to go through each one and talk about what's in here. So the first one is general. It gives you the name and all that stuff. We've already pre-selected that. The advanced is the exact snapshot folder where you will create a snapshot of your machine should you choose to take one. What is a snapshot? Okay, so as these machines run, you may get to a place where everything's working perfectly. Now you want to go test something. What this software will allow you to do is create a snapshot of that machine at that point in time. Then you can go on and install whatever you're testing. You can play with it, and if it breaks, you can always roll back to that snapshot. The advantage to that is that you always have a way back, and you can keep doing that until you get whatever you're trying to get working. Great. The disadvantage is that it becomes very complex storage-wise after a while because it tries to keep deltas of what changed from when you did the snapshot. It will create another file called the snapshot, and it's basically storing the difference between the way the machine was when the last snapshot was taken and since you have put stuff in it. I used to play with snapshots a lot years ago, and I kind of realized that it was, if you wanted the machine to run for any particular time or whatever, it was kind of precarious, let's put it that way. So you can play with that if you want to. I'm not going to bother with it. I have done it in the past, let me put it that way. Alright, so then here you can share the clipboard with the main computer. That is very useful. Bidirectional. You can also set up drag and drop. Essentially what that will let you do is once we get this machine running, you should be able to take a file from the host and drop it into the guest, and it will automatically put it in downloads. That rarely ever works in my experience, so I don't even bother to turn it on. I usually communicate between host and guest using the network. It's a more secure way to do it. I will use SSH in Linux to do that, and I can transfer files using SSHFS, so I don't bother with that. Okay, let's go to System. We'll take a look here. And most of this stuff you don't want to mess with, right? Here's the number of processors. And you can also put a cap on it for how much it takes from the system. If for some reason you have a virtual machine that's going to be doing a lot of things in the background, this is specialized stuff that we don't need to worry about, so let's just keep moving. If you know you need that, then you know why you need it. Let's put it that way. Hardware virtualization. We are going to enable nested paging because that's available to us with AMD. We'll leave that at default. That's fine. All right, now I like to do a lot of tweaking when it comes to the display. First of all, we want to enable acceleration. This will allow you to get accelerated video through your video card. It starts out with a measly 16 megabytes of RAM. You can go ahead and just crank that all the way up. We're even going to make that bigger later. You can have more than one monitor. You can emulate that if you want to. feel free to play with this. We are going to be using VMSVGA as the scheme here. That's the graphic controller. And then there's another one called vboxvga. I don't see the need to change that. You may have a reason. Let's look at storage. Now, we're looking at the controllers here. Like if you think of your computer as having an IDE controller, if it's very old, and then a SATA controller, that's what we're looking at here. And yes, the VirtualBox virtual machine is a very old computer, but it's very basic and it'll run on anything. So right now, in our optical drive, which is what this IDE is controlling, we have a ISO. That is an image file that imitates a DVD. That's how Linux is distributed, and Windows as well these days. It's an installer. So this is like we have a DVD in there. If we say it's a live DVD, it won't eject when it's done. If not, it will. How do we select new ones? Well, we go over here. And if you look closely, we can choose a new file. We can pick one of these files I've already done, or we can connect to the host drive in this machine, which is a Blu-ray drive. There's actually a spinning drive, optical drive in this machine. So the main thing you want to make sure that you have checked here is that we are going to use the host I/O cache. That'll make things a lot faster. And then we're going to go down here to the SATA controller. This is our virtual hard drive controller here. And we are going to use the host I/O cache. And we're going to click in here, and we're going to make sure that this thing knows it's a solid-state drive. What does that do? First of all, using the host I/O cache means that we're going to use the main system memory, not the memory that is in that we've allocated for the virtual machine. It's a lot faster this way, and you get access to more memory. Telling it that it's a solid-state drive is important because otherwise it's going to assume that it's an old spinning drive, and when you install your operating system, it's not going to do the tweaks to properly align it for a solid-state drive, and you won't get things like the trim function working, things like that. You really want to have that. It makes a big difference in performance. Okay. I wasn't quite done there. I clicked OK. But yeah, click OK as you go through this too, because your settings here that we're doing, they don't become real until you click OK down here. All right, so as far as storage, we're done. We can go to audio. We can go to network. Now, I prefer to use a bridged adapter. Now, what this does, as far as your router is concerned on your network, this tells that hey, we got another machine here. If you use NAT, that means it's kind of grouped in with the host, and you're kind of sharing the same IP address. You really don't want to do that. You want your virtual machine to have its own IP address, especially if you're going to be using tools like SSH or network stuff. You want to make sure that that's there. If you're just fooling around with something for a little while and you just need to have internet access from the machine to install it, let's say, NAT is fine. So this is fine. This will run just fine. If you have any more special needs, you can do that. I wish I would just go on to the next one instead of closing it, because I've done that twice now. We don't really need to do anything with serial ports. We're going to say that this machine has USB 3 in it, which it does. We could set up shared folders. That's a way of sharing between the host and guest. And you have to have that all set up. I'm not going to worry about that. It's been a long time since I played with that, and I found it to be a bit cumbersome. Like I said, most of my machines I want to run in such a way that it's like a separate machine sitting next to mine, and I will use network tools for them to communicate. If that's something that you need, you can investigate that. Okay. Now, depending on what operating system you're going to run and the layout, you may want to choose, when it's in full screen, to show the full screen tools at the top of the screen. By default, they're going to be at the bottom. But if you have, like, whereas on my Linux Mint machine, the taskbar is at the bottom, you might want it at the bottom. If you were running Ubuntu, for instance, that has a GNOME desktop, then you would want that to be at the top or the bottom of the screen. I hope I didn't confuse you. You would want it to be at the bottom of the screen if your bar was at the top, like for GNOME. Okay. You would want it to be at the top of the screen if you're running something like Linux Mint. Okay, I think we're done here. But I do want to I don't like this bottom status bar, so I'm just going to make it go away. You can keep it if you want. It doesn't matter. We're ready to go. This machine should be good to go and ready to get started, except for one thing. Remember, we set the video memory to 128. There's a way to get around that. There's a hack. So let's jump over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to set our VRAM to 256 megabytes instead of just 128. So I'm just going to copy that. And then I'm going to open up a terminal. Make that a little bigger so everybody can see. I'm going to paste that in. And then I'm going to put in the name of our machine here, which is Ubuntu Mate. So let's do this. Leave the space in and everything. And it should be able to find this. So we're going to vboxmanage, modify the VM. The one we're working at is Ubuntu Mate. And we're going to set the video RAM to 256 megabytes. Let's see if it took. So go back over here. Click off here and click back on just in case that makes a difference. We go to settings. We'll take a look at display. And it took 256. We're good to go. So let's go ahead and start this thing. We're going to start the installation process. Let's talk a little bit before we start it about what you're going to see, because I'm going to do some things that'll go by pretty quickly, or at least they will appear to. There are several modes graphically that you can run this in. For whatever reason, it will default to like 800 by 600 and when you're installing, and that just doesn't look right. So what I like to do is run it in a scaled mode, and to get to that, there's it is the right control key and the letter C. We'll look at that more once we get it running. So let's just go ahead and start it up, and we get that. And I'm going to switch this into. I can show you here what I'm talking about while it's running. Go to View, okay, and you'll see down here we could switch to. We can do a full screen mode or we can do a scale mode. So let's see what scale mode looks like. It just puts it in another box. And then I can make this real big for you guys to see, which is what I actually want to do while this is loading up. So just resize and look at that. It got real big. Now you can see what's on the screen. All right, we'll let that get itself together. Alright, and now it says that we have the option to install or try. If you want to install, you can. You would go right here. I'd like to try it. We'll do it. We'll actually load up a desktop. And we'll see if we can... Alright, so there's our desktop running. And we're running in scaled mode right now. So what I want to do is I want to... open up the menu, and let's see, it's been a long time since I played around with this distribution. If I go to Control Center, I'm going to look for Displays. There it is right there. And I'd like to choose a bigger resolution for this. Usually I look for the first that's like 16 by 9. We could do 1280 by 800. I think that's 4 by 3, isn't it? I never can remember what is. Let's do 1280 by 720. Did it take? Oh, okay. We have to click apply because that other thing jumped in front of us. Yes, we'll take that. We will keep this configuration. And now it's not so, it looks better. I'm going to go ahead and stretch this out. We're still in scaled mode. So if I take it out of scale mode by clicking Control C again, should take us out. Okay. Let's try this again. Here we go. There we go. I had clicked outside of the machine. All right, so there we have kind of a standard window. Let's make that a little bigger, man. That's we could do bigger than that, couldn't we? Let's try this. Apply. That didn't make that much of a difference. $1440 by 900. Let's try that one. Apply. There we go. All right. And we'll keep that configuration. And we'll close that. Now that text is awful small. Let's see if we can go in here and kind of make it a little bigger. Where do we go to do that? I think it's appearance. Right? This just makes it a lot easier for you to see. I'll go ahead and change that. So there we go, appearance. And I'll go up here and look at fonts. And I just want to make it, I just want bigger fonts, man. Is there a way to scale them up? I don't see a way to scale fonts. Do you do that in Ubuntu, Mate? No, it really doesn't matter now. Oh, let's see. Wait a minute. There it is. Details. I knew it was in here somewhere. Let's do this. And just scale them up, make them big. Do like 120. Alright. Okay, now we can see what we're doing. Pretty cool, huh? Now this machine, we've just booted it up off of the live disk. We haven't installed it yet, and it appears to be working the way it should. So let's go ahead and run the installer. Alright, and we're going to just continue. Ask you about a language and a keyboard, and we are going to we want to install the third-party software. We do not want to download updates because that takes forever. And we'll do a normal install. It's been a long time since I installed Ubuntu Mate anywhere. I'm just going to erase the disk. I'm going to let it just do its thing. Now, if you want to, you could go in and put partitions in there if you liked, but remember, it's a very small disk. It's only 40 gigabytes. Okay. At this point, you may think to yourself, it's crashed. Don't reset it. You gotta wait. The Ubiquity installer for Ubuntu here is one that it's gathering a lot of information right now is what it's doing. And as it installs, sometimes you'll think it's not working, and it actually is. And you can always check to see if a virtual machine is working by just opening something else. So yeah, it's working. We're just waiting on the installer to figure this stuff out in the background. There we go. Okay, pick the right time zone. I'm going to put in like a real, like I'm really going to use this machine. It says, I don't want to call it, let's call it Ubuntu Mate VM. That's fine. You could set it up to log in automatically if you wanted to. I don't. Put your password in. continue. Now this is just going to install, and we'll just let it take care of itself. It'll show this slideshow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pause this video, and we'll come back when the installation process is done. Okay, we're all done installing. What did that take? 5 minutes or so? It's going to depend on your hardware how long it takes for this to do this. We're going to go ahead and restart it and see if it works. So we are restarting the system, and it says here that we should remove any USBs or DVDs or whatever we're using to install, which the system should automatically do since we didn't tell it it was a live DVD. And now we can just press enter. And now we are booting up that Ubuntu Mate install for the first time. Let's see what we get. Apparently it worked. It is actually installing. Cool. All right. Put my super secret password in there, and there it is. And we're back to a very small screen with the same stuff we had before. Okay, let us see if it picked up that we were running VirtualBox and it installed the drivers for the video. No, it did not. Because if it had, it would have filled that screen up. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go back to the scaled mode again. I'm not going to bother with the... what I'm going to do is open up a terminal in our virtual machine, and we are going to look for the proper package to install to enable the video here to do what it's supposed to do. We need to have video drivers so that we can have seamless video between the host and the guest. So in this case, it's let me do a search here. Let's apt we'll just search for anything that has VirtualBox in it. Alright, we have a bunch of packages listed here. I think this is the one we want right here, the VirtualBox Guest X11. There's also the hardware enablement if you are running a hardware enablement stack in Ubuntu. But this is basically what this package is going to look like in any distribution. So let's go ahead and install it. VirtualBox X11. Did I type that correct? I think I did. Oh my goodness, I'm so proud of myself. Let's see what happens. Okay, yes, we do want to install it. Let's do it. Okay, that is installed, and we need to reboot the VM. I've also not run any updates on the VM, and that does make a difference. So let's go ahead and take it out of scaled mode and see if that worked. There's a quick way to test that. We can go to full screen mode. And yes, it did work. Don't worry, this background will fix itself. Sometimes it tiles. Like I said, this is not always what you would call a totally seamless experience. There's little bugaboos here and there. I'm going to go to the control center. There it is. And we're going to go back to displays again because everything is tiny. We'll leave that alone. I need no, let's go to appearance. What we need to do is make the fonts bigger. And we'll turn the automatic off, and we're going to make that, I don't know, just really big, like 120 or something. Okay, close, close. Now that we have our virtual machine up and running, then probably the next thing that you'd want to do is to update the machine if we were going to be using it for other things. Now you see that since we have installed that package, that I can resize this window, and whatever size I pick, the VM will just adapt to. And there, it fixed the background. So usually I leave them about this big. You know, that's it. We have a running VM. So now that we have a running VM, I'm going to shut this down, and we're going to go over and look at the notes, because there's a couple of things I wanted to show you about how to kind of control the size of your VMs as long as you haven't pre-allocated the space. This is important if you are going to be zipping the VM up and giving it to somebody else for them to run in VirtualBox, which you can do. Also, if you're going to be running backups and VMs are going to be going with it, you're probably going to want to keep your files pretty small. So let's get out of here, and we'll go back over here like this. Okay. And we're going to talk about compacting the drives. Now we have to run some commands inside the VM itself, and then we want to run some commands on the host to compact the drive. And so the first thing that we need to do is to make sure that this thing is not doing something. We haven't installed updates on this, but I want to install sudo apt install htop. Okay, now htop will let me see what's going on with the system and how hard it's working, and we can take a look at the memory and all this other stuff. Okay, htop. There it is running. We see we have our 3 cores. And we're using 600 megabytes of our just under 4 gigabytes of RAM. And the system doesn't appear to be working too hard, so we can do what we need to do here. So what I want to do is I am going to actually have the system write out everything that it'll write out the drive completely. In other words, all of the free space on the drive, we want to make sure that it's just zeros. And that's what this does. So we're going to do sudo dd, and we're going to grab zeros from a virtual device that runs on every Linux system. I'll copy that, make sure it gets copied. And remember, we set up the clipboard so we can do this, so we should be able to paste. And what this is going to do is it's just going to write zeros out to the drive. And this will take it a little while, so we're going to pause it. While it's doing that, it's going to put it into a file in our home directory here just called 0. So let's go ahead and let that finish doing that. All right, that took a little while to fill our drive up with zeros on our virtual machine. I'll go ahead and full screen that thing. Let's go ahead and let's full screen it. It does the background. It messes up the background when I run it in full screen mode. Maybe we won't do that. Okay. So, I've probably got a message back here telling me my drive is full. Yep. Now, what we want to do is we want to delete that file. So we're just going to do rm0. That's it. And it says it's a write-protected regular file. You know why? Because we ran that with root privileges. That's it, how it is in my notes. You don't have to make that work, by the way. That's why we're getting a little problem here. Right. Well, we'll do it as the root user, and that should make it easier. Okay. Now we want to power the machine off. You don't actually have to run that as sudo. I will change that in the version that I put down below. So right now we want to power this machine off. And now it's not running. So we'll go back over here. See here where I have this set to do as sudo? You don't have to do it that way. You could do it that way if you wanted to, but you don't have to. Anyway, what we want to do now is we want to change the size of that drive. We're trying to shrink it. So what we're going to do is get a terminal. We're going to grab this command right here. And I'm going to copy it and we'll throw it in the terminal. We are now working on the host machine, just so you're not confused. Okay. And we have to put the proper path to the drive in there, because if we don't, I didn't want to do that. Let's see. There we go. There we go. Wanted to make that larger so it's easier to see. Okay, so what we want to do is where it says all this garbage, we're going to do let's see, we'll do vir VirtualBox VMs. We're going to do Ubuntu. Use Mate. I'm just filling all this in. And so the name of the actual file here will be di. And yep, that's it. That's all we need to do. And now it has made our Ubuntu Mate VDI file as small as it can be. And yes, it does run that fast, because all it is doing is just chopping off the space that has those zeros. So let's do that with another. Let's do that with another machine. And the reason why I want to do that is because I didn't show you the size of the original file. So just to bring this home, what this does, it shouldn't make that much of a difference though, because I've shrunk these other machines. We'll take a look anyway. We'll go in here and we'll go to, let's do Ubuntu 2204. And the VDI is that is our virtual disk. Currently it is 11.6 gigabytes. Let's see if we run this, if we can make it any smaller. So we run exactly the same thing, except I'm going to go in here. We're going to do Ubuntu 2204. 2204 VDI. It found it. Make sure that oh no, I got to put the DI on it or it's not going to take. Okay, let's do it. So before it was 11.8 gigabytes, and we're going to shrink it. Maybe we'll get a little, make it a tiny bit smaller. Let's see. Let's see if that changed. Yeah, we got it down to 11.6. So as these machines run and you add files and remove files and you do updates and whatever and that sort of thing, they're going to get bigger. It's just going to expand the drive. This is how you can control the size of the drive. So is there anything else we want to look at? We want to talk about resizing a drive. Would you like to try that before we get rid of the video here? Size in megabytes, it says. Now, I have not done this in a very long time, so I'll probably screw this up. So what have we got here? We've got vboxmanage, and I'm going to do... let's go ahead and copy this. Copy. I'm going to paste. Yes, I do know that you can use the center key on the mouse, the scroll bar, and double click it, but I like to kind of be a bit pedantic doing it this way so people see exactly what I'm doing. So let's figure out a drive to work with. So path to disk VDI here. Let's go ahead and get out of here. Let's do the one we just did. Let's do, let's see. We'll do Ubuntu. Oop. It's virtual. Get this right, man. Okay. Now, Ubuntu. We'll do the one we just installed. Do this once again. Found, and we're going to do DI. So it's the full file name, and then we're going to resize, and then we're going to give it the size in megabytes. So we originally made it 40. What did you do there? Oh, I see. Duh. My cursor was not where I thought my cursor would be. Plus, I forgot I was working in a terminal and thought I was working in a text editor because I have them both the same color. You ever do that? I do that sometimes. I'm looking for things that you do in text editors that don't necessarily work in a terminal. Okay, let's resize this to 60,000 megabytes. So we're going from 40 to 60. So that would be 60,000 megabytes for 60 gigabytes, right? Yep, I think so. Do it. All right, that drive has been made bigger. Let's see if it took. So we'll go over here and we will start. Now, once you have those drivers installed, it will resize itself as it boots up. All right, now how can we tell how big our drive is? Well, that's pretty easy to do, actually, because all we got to do is open up a terminal. Can I close this, please? Thank you. Ambience, man. Remember that color scheme? Good Lord, that's ancient history. Anyway, let's go to a terminal. We'll make it big inside the VM. Let's just do the full screen in the VM. Very cool. See, here's how you get to your virtual machine tools up here in a virtual machine. Okay, so let's go ahead and trying to think of the application for working with disks that's the easiest to see. And that would be gparted. Yes, please. Go ahead and install that very quickly. Okay. Okay, we don't need to run gparted with privileges. It'll ask. Let's go ahead and do that. All right. Okay. Yeah. So there's the unallocated space that we added to that drive. So what we could do for this machine now is we could boot it off of a live image which has gparted installed in it, and we could resize this drive and make it bigger if we needed to. It'd be super easy to do. You want to do it? Let's do it. See, I love these Hangout videos because then I start thinking about things to do, you know. So let's go ahead and power this machine off. When it comes back up, it'll be in full screen. So what we want to do is go to Settings, and we want to boot it off of one of those images. Any one would do at this point. So let's go down here to Storage, and it says it's empty. And I'm going to use this to add the, well, we'll do it in, let's see. Trying to figure out which one would be the best to look at without having, it'd probably be easier to do LMDE5 because I can change the fonts quick. So let's go ahead and put that in there. So now what we've basically done is we've stuck a disk in the drive, and we're going to start this up. And let me switch this to scaled mode. We'll just go ahead and boot it. Yes, please. It shouldn't take long because we're not installing it. We're just screwing around with the hard drive, man. Now, you may be asking yourself, since everything here is virtualized and we're dealing with virtual machines and everything's running off a file and it's not actually running off of a USB stick, why doesn't the live image, the installer of LMDE5 boot faster? Well, that's because these things are stored as squash.fs. Okay, so yeah, this has already got, okay, all right, so seems to me that we've got decently sized whatever here. Gparted. Okay, we're going to run gparted, and you see where our unallocated space is. It immediately jumped to that drive. So what we can do now is we can tell gparted that we want to resize. I want to resize this. I think it's automatically, well, it's, okay, hold on, let's see what I'm looking at here. Unallocated, this is, okay, we have that, okay, it's this one we want to resize. Was on the wrong one. I was on the EFI, wasn't I? No, it's still saying it can't do it. I don't understand. I'm confused. I should be able to resize this thing. Okay. I want to resize it. I want to make it bigger. Maybe I got to type it in. Well, that doesn't make sense. It should be able to do this. Let's see. Maybe we can do this with... Okay, let's try this one more time. We're trying to resize it and make it bigger than it is. Hold on, let me figure this out real quick and we'll be right back. Okay, I finally figured out what was going wrong there, and that is that I hadn't noticed over here that what the installer did was create a logical partition. So you see we have SDA2 here, and then we have a logical drive in there. And so I had to resize the logical partition first before I could resize the primary partition with the logical drive in it. Hopefully that makes sense. So now I should be able to resize this. Yes, because I resized the first one. So we're going to make that bigger. And we're going to turn this loose and say, yep, go ahead and do it. Yeah, that caught me off guard. I didn't expect that thing to actually create a logical partition and then put partitions in it. It's rather old school. Okay, it says it's done. So we have this big partition that we have created here. And we will go ahead and shut this down. Now once again it's going to remove that thing. Let's see here now. Now we're going to open up our VM. Take it out of scaled mode. Okay, let's go. We installed gparted before, so let's see if it reports that we have a bigger drive here. Okay, so gparted. Oh yeah, there it is. So that's how you would use the resize. You can make it bigger or smaller, or actually it's just bigger, I think. You would have to shrink the you'd have to shrink the VM first. You have to shrink it in there if you wanted to make it smaller, but it's really for making it bigger, because a lot of times people will allocate a very small space and then they'll realize, well, I need that extra space. So there you have been seen a demonstration of everything here. Kind of fun to hang out. These are just too much fun to play with. And I hope you see how much it can be just, just how wonderful it can be to play with these things, because it's a learning experience. Because what I'm doing with this Ubuntu Mate machine that we've created, none of this is real, I'm not doing this on my own computer or somebody else's or whatever. I am doing this in this file that I have created, and that's all there is to it. It's not real. And so therefore, you can, the sky's the limit. You can create a virtual machine and mess it up, and then create another one, and whatever you want to do. So I'm looking here for software and updates because I want to change something, because I'm actually going to run some updates. I think I'm going to keep this machine around to play with, because I just realized it's been a very long time since I've used Ubuntu Mate, Let's see, I want to do not download and install. I want to display immediately. And non-security is fine. You can display it weekly. Okay, so I should be able to do start this thing updating. A lot of the times, what I will do is just make these machines where the screen, the window is just big enough that I can run the terminal in here. Yeah, sudo apt dist upgrade. Install everything. Because usually what I end up doing with virtual machines is just work on terminals. Because they're usually there for other reasons. I don't do a lot of desktop stuff. However, with modern hardware and modern video cards, I was playing around, and I can play 60 frame video in this virtual machine or any of the others, and it works just fine. It's absolutely amazing. Anyhow, thank you for watching the video. I hope this piqued your curiosity and you want to go out and download VirtualBox and play with virtual machines. Comments, suggestions, always quite welcome. I know we got kind of down in the weeds in the end, but I was kind of hoping we would, because it's very cool. And that's part of the fun, is that it brings you up against things that you go, wait a minute, hold on, what's going on here? And it helps you to learn. This is a great learning tool. So much fun to play with. Thank you for watching. We will do this again soon.